Good evening and welcome to the February 4th, 2013 Jurupa Unified School District Board of Education meeting. We'll open with roll call, please.
President Schmidt.
Here.
Trustee Burns.
Here.
Trustee Hernandez.
Here.
Trustee Mendez absent. Trustee Schaefer.
Here, thank you.
Roger Rodarte. Here. Katie Fawcett.
Here.
Ariana Escoto.
Here.
Thank you. And could we have the flag salute, please?
Stand for the pledge. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will move to the welcome. Mr. Duchesne.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you here, Shaylee. I understand you had a rough start today.
Yes, I did. My very first car accident this morning.
Well, we feel bad for you, but we heard it was not your fault, so we're glad for that. And we're glad to see you here, and we're glad you're okay.
Thank you.
So, and you're first. How about that? Oh, we're ready for you.
Okay, sorry. I didn't realize that was my intro. Sorry. Alright, well, it's been a great week to be a warrior. Last Saturday, we had our winter formal at the March Air Force Base Museum. The theme was Fire and Ice, and it was our most attended winter formal ever. We had over 350 students attend, and it was a great night. Coming up next Friday, we have our spring academic rally where we will honor students in the top 10 in their class and also the top 10 most improved GPA. We'll also be honoring the top 10 in the graduating senior class with a special honoring of the valedictorian and salutatorian. We have Mr. Patriot coming up on February 22nd, and what this event is it's a male beauty pageant for juniors and seniors boys at our school. Each club will be nominating one junior or senior boy to participate, and I know from doing this event a couple years ago that it's hilarious. It's definitely one you don't want to miss. The past 2 weeks we've had Pennies for Patients going on in our school to raise money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and how we're doing a unique spin on this is we're doing a class competition, and we have 4 jugs set up in the quad at lunch, and for every penny that you put into your class's jar, it counts positive towards your class, but any silver or dollars that you put into another class's jug counts negative. So potentially a class could end up with negative $20 in their jug, but another class could win because they have 3 cents, just depending on how much money you donate. So all in all, it really raises money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and that's what it's really all about. Last Friday night, we played Jurupa Valley in boys basketball, and unfortunately, we lost our rival game, but it was definitely a close one and much better than the first time around. We're preparing in our WASC committees for our upcoming inspection and looking for ways to improve the Patriot community along with parent and student input. We'd like to recognize Ms. Butler, who's here tonight as part of our Fulbright exchange program. I've had the opportunity to really get to know Ms. Butler over the past few months, and she's such an amazing lady, and we've been honored to have her here at Patriot. That's it for this week. We'll get to hear more about prom and the other great things coming up at Patriot next time.
Thank you, and I hope you never again have to deal with what you dealt with this morning. Ariana, you're next.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to start off by saying Rubidoux High School's first ever morph dance was definitely a success. We had a spectacular winter sports rally last Friday, followed by our black light dance, both having a great outcome. Regarding academics, beginning this Saturday the 9th, Rubidoux will begin our KC boot camp for all the sophomores interested to attend and receive additional practice and tips to ensure good test scores on KC. On another note, this Wednesday, February the 6th, RHS will be holding our next ELAC meeting, followed by our next parent seminar, February 13th, on substance abuse, conducted by the Wiley Center. Rubidoux will also be starting parenting classes Thursday nights at 6 p.m. through the Parenting Project. In other news, Rubidoux girls sport coaches were given the opportunity to choose a representative for each team to go and attend the Women's Sports Leadership Conference, which I'm sure was quite the honor. Last but not least, this Friday at 6 p.m., Rubidoux will be holding a chili cook-off and a theater performance for all those who come and support our theater, and we hope to see you all there. Tickets are only $5.
Thank you. And Roger, Jurupa Valley.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. At Jurupa Valley, we're also kicking off our Pennies for Patients drive, and we're collecting pennies in our 4th grade classes. Instead of having that class competition between actual juniors, freshmen, sophomores, seniors, we're doing it differently, and we're having it class by class. So every 4th period, the 4th period that collects the most money actually gets a prize, which is to be announced possibly a peace party or a dinner party. They're choosing probably. And tomorrow, actually, February 5th, boys soccer and boys basketball are hosting their senior night at 5 p.m. Boys soccer is currently 8, 6, and 2 in overall, and they're 3, 3, and 2 in league, placing them 3rd overall in league. And our boys basketball they're 19 wins and 4 losses, and they're 7 in 1 league, placing them 1st in league. And also, that game on versus Patriot last Friday, I heard it was pretty intense. I wish I could have been there, but I was over here at home watching the girls play. And our girls also beat Patriot. And girls basketball is currently 8-0 in league, placing them 1st as well. Our girls soccer also beat Patriot. Placing them, they're currently 7-0 in 1 in league, placing them all as well, 1st in league as well. Also, our ASB will be bussing tables and waiting on guests February 13th at Applebee's on Limonite. If you wish to support our ASB and come over and have a friend serve you, head down on between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. for our Tip of Jack night at Applebee's. And last year it was lots of fun. Actually, like shadowing a waiter around, and like actually it was kind of my first job in a way. So it was pretty fun. And you get to meet like a lot of great people.
Do we have to say something?
And also our ASB has finally picked the place for our annual City Hawkins dance. The event will be held at John's Incredible Pizza Company in Riverside from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Tickets will go on sale today, and they're $30 a ticket, $55 for couples. Our theme is Incredible Duos, and since it is a City Hawkins dance, girls get first choice. You get choice there. That's always interesting to watch. Girls always asking the guys, like, they get a feel for what we usually feel on homecoming prom and the other dance. And also currently, our school is being beautified in a way, because we're going under construction, or not construction, but like our school is getting like spruced up for our WASP visit in March. We'd like to thank you guys for that. There's a tree chopped down. I missed that tree. Our school was pressure washed last week, and it's currently being painted, and it's a great improvement. And I just like to say personally, thank you very much for that. And that's all from Valley.
Thank you. It's great to have you all here.
Thank you. And have you been meeting with Fernanda de la O from last year? Because you're starting to take on her persona. All right. Next is recognition, and we'll recognize Miss Lindsay Butler, the Fulbright Exchange teacher. Mr. Trujillo.
Thank you and good evening. On behalf of Mr. Dabrowski, I have the great pleasure tonight of introducing and recognizing a teacher who is new to Patriot this year, who is also part of the Fulbright Exchange Teacher Program. The Fulbright Exchange Teacher Program operates with 6 countries to include the Czech Republic, Hungary, India, Mexico, the United Kingdom, and of course the United States. The teachers who are selected for this program are thought to be the cream of the crop in that they have to go through a very stringent and rigorous selection criteria. So we lost a great teacher in Rachel Williams, who will be back, and we hope to hear more from her as she learns in another country. But in exchange, we got a wonderful addition who you heard a little bit more about earlier, and that's Miss Lindsay Butler. Ms. Butler has a couple of words to share with the board, and she's here also with her principal, Roberta Pace, and some fellow colleagues from Patriot.
Hello, I'm Hi, Lizzie. Ariana, lovely to meet you, and Roger, but I'm sorry I wouldn't do my job if I didn't know Go Warriors. So, you know, you might have lost, but probably not for long. Okay, hi everyone. Sorry, this feels really strange. In England, if anyone gets up to speak with a piece of paper in their hand, you get a really big mighty like that, but I promise it's going to be really short and sweet. So, I just want to clarify that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. It's a dream come true. The Fulbright... Sorry, I'm going to be trying not to be emotional. I apologise.
It's perfectly fine. We like it. You're welcome.
We like happy tears.
Trust me, they are happy tears. I wish you would have said what you said, Shane. It's just you guys are amazing, and the Fulbright experience has just been superb. I'm fine now, sorry. And I thank the powers that be who, you know, that I got blessed with this opportunity from being able to experience other school districts. I thank you allowing me that time and that opportunity, and by being able to see other schools in, you know, in the other states working, I kind of thank God that I got put in Jurupa Valley District. It's just awesome, so I thank you, the district, for that. You know, the opportunity to be immersed in all things USA, I just can't tell you how lucky I feel on a daily basis to have that experience. Mainly because the staff have just been monumental. They're a group of people who have completely embraced the journey that I'm on. And I thank them. It's truly a home from home. I'm really close to my team back at NLL, but I feel like I've been here for years. I really do, in a good way. That's a really good thing. The team here at Patriot are just superb, and I really, you know, thank them for all their energy and their dedication. And we're only halfway through, but it's going so quickly. It's comforting also to know that the conversations are the same both sides of the pond. So, you know, 21st century skills, the standards that we have to pass on to the students, literacy, numeracy, the wellbeing curriculum, the fact that we're having the same conversations about being the best teachers we can be is just, you know, that's comforting to know that it's not, you know, we share that vision, and that's just wonderful. The elements are truly overwhelming to experience here are your pride, your patriotism, your dedication to education, both academically and extracurricular. I experience this on a daily basis, and I will cherish the experiences that I'm having for a lifetime because of the likes of Shady and the students, all of you. You know, at Jurupa I went to watch the game, and you guys are just awesome as well, and I hope I get the chance to come and visit Rudo, I really do. So it's just wonderful. The Fulbright experience regarding personal and professional development in my lifetime will never be matched. It's a journey that is teaching me who I am, and also about being the teacher I want to be. And hopefully by the end of this year, it's all about being better and striving to be better. And I do apologise for getting upset. I'm very embarrassed, but I just couldn't contain it. It's just wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Ms. Butler, I just want to say I have only heard, not good things, just wonderful things about you. And we always think about, it's very nice to be able to send our teachers abroad so they can bring back a little of the culture here. We wish we could send all of our students to England, but we brought England to them. So thank you for being here. It's been, I know, just a delight for the staff and the students, and we feel very graced to have you in our presence. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for coming and sharing with us tonight. Next, we'll move on to recognize Mr. Duchamp, Mrs. Elzig.
Thank you. Our Superintendent Elliot Duchamp has been selected to receive AXA Region 19's highest honor, the Dr. John Schrom Award. Mr. Duchamp was nominated by every certificated and classified administrator in the district for his selfless service to his profession and also for his service to the community as he volunteers and works in the Jurupa Valley community and volunteers also in taking food and resources to orphanages in Mexico. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention tonight. We celebrate this award and it will be celebrated together with all of AXA in May at the celebration that they hold. Thank you. Woo-hoo.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to public verbal comments, and this is an opportunity to include comments for anything on or off the agenda. I have 2 slips for tonight. You'll to be given 5 minutes. Up here is a timer. It'll start green when you begin. We'll go to yellow when you have 1 minute, and red when you need to end your comments. I want to remind everyone that tonight's meeting is recorded both audibly and video, and that every speaker has a right to their own opinion, and the board will not be making comments until the end of tonight's meeting. First will be Mr. Luna.
Hello, it's my first time here, but I go through other committees, but I've never been in this one. Just bear with me. I have some questions for tonight. I'm with the Need Help organization. Why I'm here is to discuss certain matters of, I don't know if it's, should I say protocol or matters of security problems with schools. I'm working with Justin Martinez. We have met Paul Gill, and with this gentleman here, we're discussing about matters about schools that need further up on their procedures of they have matters of schools that don't have the proper gating and keep predators out, because predators could come at us in many forms. It could be a child, it could be an adult, it could be anybody. It's evil that works in mysterious ways. What it is what we're trying to help on is we could give a hand in trying to give a little bit of information about what we could do to help. We got with Paul Gale. Yeah. We talked to him, and at first it was a matter of talking to this gentleman right here about having some type of assistance. Maybe we need to get some people up, get a background check and everything. Do some security matters and keep the school safe and keep open eyes, because that's very important. What's going on there is, like you said, you don't know who it is. It could be your neighbor, it could be your relative, it could be anybody. But as I see it, I mean, what I was hearing from Justin Martinez that when he talked to certain people, when people were saying, higher ups were saying, well, maybe it's not a good idea that you come around and it would be a problem. So what I want to discuss tonight is anything being done about these procedures need to be done to advance the schools, because of what I was thinking, maybe in the future, to get cameras, to get some type of security boot up, and some type of training for these staff, in case they ever come across. Because if you look around the world, and you look what happened in LA not too long ago, actually a couple of days, there was an incident about someone getting hurt. And what happened in Connecticut, out there with 20 children getting killed. But ain't saying that it will never happen here. But this is why we want to jump on it to remind everybody what can we do instead of working against each other or saying, okay, what about tomorrow? Tomorrow it doesn't work that way. What about resolving the problem now? We need to work on this, because I mean there's some kids involved. I mean, children are our future. When it comes up to children, I'm in an organization. When it comes up to children, I'm right 100% behind them, no matter what I do to help with what I'm going to do. But how can we resolve this problem? Is there
I believe in the communications you've been told that we are, and even before anything happened in December, children and their safety is everyone in this district's utmost concern, and there are things being done. It wouldn't be security if we discussed every matter with any and every public person that came in, but I can assure you that each child in this district's safety is a concern for everyone, and there are things being done every day, and each school is being looked at individually to see what needs to be done to make them safe and secure. If there are things going on every day, there's things being looked at if there's a problem.
I understand that. Well, the schools around me where I live, for instance, you look at certain schools like West Lane, Pacific. I know Pacific has been a little bit worked on. They actually just got really putting some more gating in. Like West Lane. But it's just certain procedures of keep their gates open. You know, because I noticed that Pacific has their gates open in the back. You know, for the staff to come through. What about keeping it locked all the time? I mean, after staff is there, just to keep the school secure. I mean, I see that might be a problem in the future too.
You
I mean,
have 1 minute.
Oh, 1 minute. Okay. Like I said, it's my first time. Eventually I'll learn how to make it real fast.
This will tell you.
Okay. But like I said, this is why I'm here. Like I said, there's a lot of concerns about these schools. I know that you are doing your part, but to certain information what I'm getting, you're not. So this is why I'm here, just to talk to you about it. And I just wanted to have a first question, honest question. Are you? Is it being done, or is it not being done?
Mr. Gill or Mr. Duchamp?
What I will tell you is we work very closely with the school site staff, the principal, and the sheriff's department. Each school has a safety plan. School staff are trained. If you see things you believe are unsafe, please bring them to either mine or Mr. Gill's attention. We do not share our safety protocols publicly because they're safety protocols.
No, I
Well, yeah, and let me finish that. We have embarked actually starting several years ago with fencing off all of our campuses. Now I will tell you, and anyone will tell you, that does not provide any absolute protection. Our schools are not prisons. We also encourage parents to be on campus, so we want people to be invited, but also to be protected, and we work to that end. We understand yours and Mr. Martinez's concerns, and they've all been taken under advisement. We do have worked with the sheriff for extra vigilance at each campus. But we do not have a citizen committee that does an assessment of safety at each school. That would be kind of that's counterintuitive. You wouldn't do that at the Pentagon. They provide their security, we provide
I didn't
ours.
mean it that way.
Yeah.
I didn't mean it that way.
So we invite anybody.
I'm just saying we're here to help. Yeah.
Okay, and we certainly have invited
Just want a
them.
little information.
Yeah, and if there are people we've heard that there are volunteers that might be interested, we would work through the school site. They would have to be properly fingerprinted and such. Yeah, right. So, thank you for your concerns.
Thank you. Anissa Martinez?
Hi. I'm pretty much going off of what he was saying. My name is Anissa Martinez, and my daughter Zoe is 4 years old. She's in preschool, and she's in a special ed class. She attends Pacific Elementary. And Zoe, along with other children, they do not know how to keep themselves safe. That is one of the many jobs that us as parents have. And with that being said, I believe security in schools should be our top priority. Every day we are hearing new incidents that are happening in our schools in America that are harming our children. My husband has brought up to some of you problems with he believes are the security problems in our schools. And I just wanted to say that we just like to see some of these issues resolved. with security in mind. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to administrative reports and written communications and announce the initial district proposal for negotiations with CSEA. Mrs. Elzick.
Thank you. The board will have reviewed in closed session, and they have the district preliminary proposal for reopener negotiations with CSEA. This proposal will be publicized at this time to permit public comments in the verbal hearing session at the next board meeting on February 19th, 2013. This is for information only.
Thank you. And next, announce initial district proposal for negotiations with NEAJ Jurupa.
Yes, the board also reviewed in closed session the district's preliminary proposal for reopener negotiations with NEA Jurupa. This proposal is being publicized at this time to permit public comments in the verbal hearing session at the February 19th, 2013 board meeting.
Thank you. And item C, accept initial bargaining proposal from NEA Jurupa.
Thank you. The district is in receipt of the initial contract reopener proposal from NEA Jurupa for the 2013-14 school year. It's recommended that the board receive the proposal and withhold comment at this time. This proposal will be publicized at this time to permit public comments during that same board meeting, the verbal hearing session at the February 19th, 2013 board meeting. Thank you.
And I'm not going to let you get away yet because we did not report out from closed session. So if you would like to do that, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The board voted in closed session by a 4-0 vote to approve the settlement agreement of employee number 093701. Let me say that again so it was clear. 093701. The board voted in closed session by a 4-0 vote to accept the resignation of employee number 208018. The board voted in closed session by a 4-0 vote to accept the resignation of employee number 202664. The board voted in closed session to accept the voluntary demotion of employee number 214627. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll move to item D, report on the transition to the Common Core state standards. Mr. Trujillo.
Yes, good evening. As the board knows, on this side of the pond, the entire country is busy planning the successful transition to the Common Core state standards, as are many states and districts such as JUSD. This evening, I have the opportunity to explain to you a little bit about where we are in that work. First and foremost, the district is very committed to gathering significant input from stakeholders, to include principals and teachers, to help guide the transition to the Common Core. As the board very well may know, the district created a Common Core steering committee, and this committee over the course of the last several months has met many times, to include most recently 2 full days, to better understand the Common Core state standards. That is, better we as teachers and leaders understand the standards in their entirety, then the more likely we are to successfully plan a transition to those Common Core state standards. So those 2 days of training was geared or designed to help us gain a deeper understanding of those standards. The steering committee then shortly thereafterwards designed, or I should say they met and discussed several priorities for consideration for the district. And then these priorities were also then reviewed by the principals for comment and feedback. And essentially at this moment in time, the district has identified 4 initial priorities to help guide our work towards a transition towards the Common Core. First of all, the priorities are these. Number 1 is to prioritize the standards. Generally, all standards are not created equal, and there isn't generally enough time in the school year to teach, assess, reteach all state standards. So districts then are are advised to through a very careful process to identify those standards that are largely considered to be the most important. So that's part of the prioritization process. So over the course of the next several months, 2 different committees will be formed, one in language arts and one in mathematics, representing teachers K-12, as well as all principals to be a part of the prioritization process. In addition to that, another goal for the district is that we, once prioritize, that we, whereas the committee, that steering committee I spoke of just a few moments ago, whereas that committee has had the opportunity to go deep into their analysis and review of the state standards, not all teachers throughout the district have. And whereas some schools may have done a little bit of that work as far as analysis of the standards, not every school has. So once our priority standards are identified, then the plan is that we then, if you will, analyze to a deeper level. Oftentimes that's called the unwrapping or the unpacking process, but that is the standards are looked at very deeply so that teachers then can have a better and a full understanding about the rigor of those standards, and in particular the depth of knowledge that's expected for those standards. That's a key piece for us in this district as well as the state, because that's generally a new type of analysis that's happening with standards, and that depth of knowledge analysis will also gear us up towards preparation for the next generation assessments which are coming down the pike. So prioritization is priority 1. Priority 2 is that we go deeper in our analysis of those priority standards, which is priority 2. Priority number 3 then is that we then begin to develop units of study. So now we have our priorities identified. We then have a better understanding about what's expected in those standards. So now then, how can we begin to group these standards together and develop units of study, K-12. So that's priority number 3. And then lastly, the 4th focus area for the district is that we begin to develop a better understanding and practice in developing performance-based assessments. That is, as you very well know, the Common Core state standards are not only going to assess students via the old multiple choice format, which is often called the selected response. There's a series of responses, A, B, or C, or D, and students are asked to select which one of those is most likely the answer. In addition to selected response items, the assessments which are coming down the road are going to also include constructed response items and performance-based items. That is, students are going to have to actually create and produce evidence of their learning that goes far beyond a multiple choice item. So that understanding in the performance-based world is the 4th priority for the district. So beginning in February 20th and the 21st, we will have our first group of teachers come together representing all of the schools to begin that prioritization process in mathematics. And then approximately 1 month later, all of the teachers, the selected teachers committee will come together to do a very similar process for English language arts. And then these first draft documents will then go back to the sites for review and comment by all staff. That is, there's a very concerted effort to get the input from every teacher in this district so that the decisions made have been well thought out and everybody's had opportunity to have some input. So that's where we are relative to the transition, and I'll happily take questions if there are any.
Mr. Schaefer.
Mr. Trujillo, what is the makeup of this steering committee?
Great question. There are going to be approximately, the steering committee is made up of about 30 participants district-wide, to include, I believe, about maybe 3 or 4, about maybe 2 or 3 principals, the ESC management staff, and about 20, 25 of those steering committee members are in fact made up of classroom teacher leaders from throughout the district.
Have the teachers expressed any of their concerns so far as far as the priorities that the process? What are some of their concerns?
The The concerns district-wide from teachers and principals both is that, number one, that we have enough time to do the work thoughtfully. So time is generally a concern. There is an interest to try to get as much work done as possible this year, but with the testing season upon us, we're already into second semester, so the concerns are that we do it well, we do it thoughtfully, and as you know, some concern has been that we get or we elicit good feedback and or input from a cross-section of participants, so those have been worked into the process.
And one last question is, what is your opinion on the switching, transitioning into the Common Core standards from where we're at? How is it going to be a bumpy ride, in your opinion? I mean, from where we're coming from to where we're going with this transition. Will it be a bumpy ride? Can we expect a bumpy ride?
Well, we have about 15 years of experience trying to implement standards, so I believe that there is a fair amount of knowledge and skill and know-how within the district from teachers and leaders both. That being said, we also are very wed to those standards over the last 15 years, and the Common Core State standards are generally considered to be considerably more rigorous, and the way that we're going to be assessed in those standards is considerably different. So whereas I don't know that I would call it a bumpy ride per se, I do think it's understood that there will be some challenges as we continue to do the work. We're not assessed until 2014-15 in those for these standards. That being said, we don't want to wait till 2014 and 15 in order to begin to implement and learn and grow relative to these standards. So I think there will be some challenges ahead of us, but my opinion is that I think it's great for kids and it's great for our country, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And talking to most of the folks whom I talk to, I think they are equally excited about it, although we all recognize that the work ahead of us is not just important, but it's going to be hard.
Thank you. I wanted just to add one thing and reinforce something Mr. Trujillo said. Our district has worked with standards for a very long time, and in fact we're fortunate to have Mr. Trujillo, who's done staff development across the country on implementing standards-based instruction. Generally, in California, the reception to Common Core standards has been very good. Our teachers in the content area like them because California standards have been both high and wide. There is a concern, and we all share a concern, that the transition to the assessment of Common Core standards may be more difficult than the transition to the standards. And just one example, we were walking through a classroom. Trustee Hernandez was looking at the AAA Academy, and one of the teachers was working on a math worksheet where the students not only had to answer the question, but they had to explain each step that they went through. Well, that is very much embedded in the Common Core standards and very different from the kind of assessment we've ever had to deal with. So it's a major transition, but in some respects, less of one for the teachers in Jurupa, because they are, as I said, they've gone through 2 transitions of standards already. We still have many teachers that were involved in the initial development of district standards, and they were wed to those, and those may have in some ways even had some benefits over state standards, but they were different. But I think generally there's a great reception of the standards, and they're going to be hard to teach. I think people recognize that, and even harder to assess. But they're very good, I think. We all agree on that. So,
Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. Mr. Trujillo, what are some of the challenges that you see in implementing this program?
Where should I begin?
You made statements that there were several. I know there's probably millions of them.
Sure.
Some of the things that we need to be concerned with.
Sure. I think there are several inherent challenges when embarking upon something of this magnitude. That is a transition to, a whole different set of standards that we expect our students to learn. Number one is that it's providing the time. That is, we're trying to, plan the work and do the work while at the same time doing what we normally do, that is our own work. So it's finding enough time in the day to do all of it well. There is always a challenge about priorities, and that is, what I think maybe is the best course of action may or may not be thought of as a course of action by another person or by another group or by another leader. So that is trying to bring together the various viewpoints and listen to the pros and the cons and the good and the bad about all of those viewpoints, and then essentially trying to negotiate or navigate a process that allows input from all, but at the same time, once that decision is made, providing the supports in order for everybody to do it well. So I think time and just generally trying to get others to agree on most, if not all, of the steps that we continue to take. Resources is going to be another challenge that is going to have to be, certainly discussed. That is, whereas many textbook publishers at the current time claim to have standard-based materials that are aligned to the Common Core, the experts would tell us that that's generally not the case. So as we identify new things to teach, new things that we want the students to learn, then we need to find also new resources for teachers to be able to do that. Also relative to instruction, that is, there will be instances where we're asking teachers to teach at a much deeper level of expectation from the students as far as what they learn and do. It's not just, for example, in mathematics, procedural skills and computational fluency. We also now expect that they have a deep understanding about concepts in mathematics. And then they also have the ability to take what they know and apply it in new contexts and new world, I think of it as the way the world works, but in real world problems. So whereas teachers often want students to do that, we don't often teach that way, in part because it's really not an expectation and it's not assessed that way. That is all changing now. So I think part of it is helping teachers and leaders and learn the new strategies to teach to that level of depth. It's the instructional materials, it's getting agreement where agreement is needed, and it's the time which essentially it takes to do all of that work and to do it well.
Mrs. Burns?
As far as the resources that we're going to need for teachers to come in and take the place of teachers that are in training, do we have enough for that?
And if I understand your question is, do we have enough?
Do we have enough finances to cover the replacement teachers while we're training the teachers?
One of the things that I've learned coming to the district office is a little bit more about budgets and the importance of staying true to the budget, and that is, staying within our means. So I'm happy to say that all of the planned activities for this year, also to include this summer. So some of the actions that we're planning to do is to do some summer work. But all of the planned activities are permissible within the budget constraints that we have.
Do we have a ballpark number of how many meetings that you're going to require extra teachers for?
There are various groups of teachers and committees that have already been formed and that will be forming. And no, that is.
Thank you for your direct
I wish
answer.
I could say, but no. For example, just take the initial work that's happening later on this month. Teachers, that is those 50 or 60 teachers that are coming together to prioritize.
How many times?
There'll be, we'll have the language arts teachers, 60 of them approximately will be there over 2 days, 2 consecutive days to complete that work. and then a corresponding number of math teachers will also do it 2 days to do that work.
Okay,
So,
this has been figured into your proposal. The state is mandating all of this regardless of if we can afford it or not. Is that true?
yes, it's true.
Okay, so I think my answer's pretty much got it, that you'll stay on top of that, and
I assure you we will.
yeah, and we'll know and get reported to us of extra expenses and how to do it, because we need to do it. My questions were not forming, don't do this. It needs to be done. It's just, I think that we need to know just what the real costs are so that we can deal with them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer?
The real cost would also involve instructional materials, textbooks, curriculum. So we have no estimate on what that is.
At this time, no. We're still waiting for those materials to be identified and aligned to the new frameworks that are also being that are under development right now. So it's a multiple year project.
Thank you, Mr. Trujillo. Next, we'll move to the review approval of the 2012-13 first interim financial report and governor's budget proposal. Mr. Gill.
Thank you. You received a report from Riverside County Office of Education, and they concurred in our self-assessment that we were qualified for our first interim report on the budget. And that's been the case each interim report we've had for a few years now, and the letter is frankly not a lot different from anything that you've seen in the recent past. So what I wanted to do was show you a few slides that we showed the Budget Committee a few weeks ago, and it would put things in perspective on how we are doing at Jurupa schools. The one priority that we have, and I think we share this with all of the associations, is we want to keep the jobs that we have. We want to avoid layoffs if at all possible. Everyone knows that our benefit structure for health and welfare is low. We would like to improve that if we possibly could. And all of the employees have suffered through furlough days for a few years now, and we want to try and cut back as much as we can with that. Now, in keeping this bottom line in mind, here are a number of numbers that correlate to certain things that we have to work through. The 1.65% is the planning number right now that school services and the state is giving us, saying that we should expect, for the first time in a few years, an increase in cost of living allowance, and that's 1.65%. For Jurupa, that works out to $1.4 million. To put that in perspective, we normally budget about $1 million for teachers' step and column alone. So $1.4 million in a $150 million budget isn't a whole lot of money. The other thing to keep in mind, and we will as we go through negotiations, one furlough day roughly equals $500,000 in savings. So whenever we have a furlough day, we are able to save $500,000, and it breaks down where the teachers contribute the most because of the number in the payroll of $367,000. The classified contribute almost $100,000, and management $35,000. And then another thing that we keep in mind is when we talk about medical benefits, this is the cap amount that we have. We have a hard cap for classified and management of $5,800. It's roughly $6,100 for the teachers. And every $100 we go up roughly costs the district $200,000. There's just some of the numbers that we want to share with everybody. Everybody keep in mind of what we're looking at. Jeff, if you could do the second slide, please. This is a slide that I thought might interest everybody because this shows basically what Jurupa got back in the 07-08 time period, and then what we are going to get this next budget year, 2013-14. The blue line that runs straight across right here, this is the line that shows if we were funded at the level that we had in revenue limit money, which is our largest amount of money that we get from the state. It was almost $5,800 back in 2007 and 2008. and we just run that line across right here to say, in this particular case, no COLA increases. If we just got what we got back about 6 years ago, we would be making a lot more money and be able to have a lot more money to use for our students, to educate our students, and to help pay our employees, and not ask them for cuts. So the amount was almost $5,800. It's $5,786. This line here shows what actually happened. We dropped down in 9-10 as low as less than $5,000 per student in ADA money. And this year, with the governor's proposal for Jurupa Unified, and every district is very slightly different, but we are going to be at the $5,300 mark. Now, the top blue line just shows you if the standard cost of living were applied, here's where we would be each year. And if that cost of living, if we would have gotten that, like we usually do in good times, we would be up to $6,818, which would be $1,500 more per student than what we're actually going to be getting. Now, if you take just 20,000 students, and we're at about 19.3 right now, but just to use 20, that's a difference of $1,500. So that would be about $30 million more that we would have this year to educate our students than we actually have. If you take the number, even if we just would not have received the cuts, but just got the money that we got back in 07 and 08, and not many people are living on what they got back in 07, 08, although I guarantee some are, of $5,800, it would be $500 more per student, and that would be about $10 million more than what we are actually budgeting. So while Proposition 30, it was terrific, we think, from an educational viewpoint, that it passed, that Proposition 30 did not add new money, it just prevented further cuts to the district. That $5,300 that we're getting would have been significantly less than that. So we would be talking about drastic cuts this year, and we're not going to do that. And the last slide just shows you how we've been able to survive, and that's basically from the ending fund balance we have. And most of you have seen this chart before, but this is a chart where our taxes are passed. These rectangular columns up here shows that we got a significant amount of federal money in for about 3 years in a row. That money ended in 2011 and 2012. If you add all of these together, I think you get about pretty close to $13 million was added to our coffers that helped absorb those huge cuts we were getting from the state. The other thing that was a great benefit were the sacrifices of our employees and programs that were cut in order to save money. So these bubble figures here show how much those savings with employee cutbacks and with program cutbacks. It was $6.1 million, $6.9 million, and then when we eliminated all the programs we thought we safely could, at the end of this year, 10-11, the 4.2 and the 4.4 million come directly from the pocketbooks of our employees. So the ending fund balance, once the federal money ran out, the ending fund balance dropped to, at the end of 12-13, it's $19.2 million. This $19.2 million includes restricted and unrestricted, and it also includes the 3% reserve. These numbers are a little bit hard to read, but the 3% reserve means we need almost $5 million, and then we have restricted money that we cannot spend on anything we want to, but it's for restricted programs, of about $4 million. So that's almost $9 million of this is used up in reserve and restricted money. And you can see the next year we don't program in any employee sacrifices because we haven't negotiated anything yet, and we don't want to assume anything. The good graces of our employees, we have to work with them and see what we can do. But the fund balance drops to $12.5 million by the end of 13-14, and then 14-15, when we look out one more year, it goes to 4.1. So this doesn't even meet our reserves, let alone the roughly $4 million that we usually have in restricted funds. So they're the only slides I have for you. I just wanted to put in context what that letter is. That letter from RCLE requires no action, but it's information only. and I'd be happy to answer any questions about what you've just seen if you'd like.
Can we make comments?
Of course.
It doesn't make me feel good.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate the job that you've done keeping us informed, and the overall picture that we do need to get once in a while of how employees have taken the brunt. And I hope that politics changes all over the United States and that we take a better look at education. For us to suffer that kind of loss is pretty powerful, and they take it out of the kids. It certainly doesn't make me feel good. Mr. Schaefer?
We're not as fiscally healthy as we'd like to be. I commend the district for maintaining a solid financial operation, which is very challenging. I have a couple questions here. On page 3 of this item, other key assumptions, it says the multi-year financial projections also indicate that total expenditures and uses exceed total revenue in all 3 fiscal years. Well, we're looking at a qualified certification. Why aren't they saying we're in a negative certification if we're 3 straight years of projections are 3 years of negative?
Because one of the things we have for this year that we're in, and next year, we do have that ending fund balance, which albeit it is dropping, there is still enough to take care of our needs for 13-14. In 14-15, we literally drop off the cliff, so we need to address some of those needs in the budget year of 13-14. But while we can do that, while we can serve our financial interests now, and we can serve them as well next year, and we will have to take action the following year in order to maintain our reserves and in order to pay for our expenses. They understand we have a history of doing that. RCOE understands we have a history of doing that, and they agree with the qualified status, which we actually self-certify.
Also, we have very limited control over student enrollment and students transferring out of the district. There's a lot of money lost there the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, $4 million. The number of students at a district, ADA-wise, is a driving force in the financial planning. And yet we have no control over that. We discussed this before, and how are we going to address that to improve, or are we on track as far as finding out, putting a program together to find out why these parents are transferring out and ways to retain them, because we're talking millions of dollars there.
We took that, and Mr. Schaefer, I don't know if it was you or the board as a whole, recommended that we dive a little deeper into this when we do have people ask for inter-district transfers, and we've done that. We have asked in the past for what's your reason, but we're getting into that a lot deeper. But we're also suggesting that we have great educational programs too. We continue to see in our district every single year our test scores have risen. Every now and then you'll have, when you have a big jump in one school, you might have a little bit of a drop down the next year, but for the most part, it's been a rising tide. We had questions asked of us about one of our schools that's in a relatively a humble neighborhood, I'll say. That school's approaching 800 in test scores in API, which is really rather remarkable from where they came over the course of this few years. So we need to, I think, continue to get the word out, continue to let people know the effort that our administrators and our teachers and our staff in general put into continually improving our schools, and we intend to do that.
I just have two other questions. In the audit report, it has that certificates of participation payables as 7.2 million, and the documents in our agenda have 10 million. That's a $3 million difference.
Are you talking about the audit report from Nigro?
Right. They're showing 7.2, but in the agenda concerning this item, we've got 10.
I'd ask my director of fiscal services if, do you know that off the top of your head, Karen? Or?
No, I don't.
Okay.
We'll get back to you on that. I'm not sure it's a discrepancy, and I'm sure there's a reason for it.
These long-term commitments, the energy efficiency financing program, that is 100% the Chevron project, correct?
Yes.
And it shows that the payment for 2012, 2013, and subsequent years, I take it as being over $2 million.
Yes, sir. For 14 more years.
When will
years
the savings? How long will it take for the savings to pay for?
The savings are kicking in already. Every month we see substantial savings. It's a couple, only about 2 months behind, because we had a little bit of difficulty with the Edison bureaucracy getting the solar panels on the grid as quickly as we should. Everything else has gone pretty well. So we're seeing those savings. Chevron has also guaranteed us that if those savings over the course of a year don't pay for that debt service, they write us a check and make the difference.
So eventually, that will be
It should be a positive. On the whole, if you look at an entire full year where you have all solar up and everything is working, it was roughly worked out to be between $40,000 and $44,000 a year that we would get over and above the debt payment. Once we get through 15 years, then we jump up into the millions of dollars of savings. We're away from that. But we need to see that those Chevron savings pay for the debt service, or Chevron will write a check to us to make up the difference.
Do you think the Riverside County Office of Education at page 2, implications of qualified certification, they've got those 2 boxes checked. Will the board be receiving those reports also?
Could you just tell me those boxes are?
It says require the district to encumber all contracts and other obligations to prepare appropriate cash flow analysis and monthly or quarterly budget revisions.
With all the information you get now, we actually do that. What they're just saying is you need to have money in the bank before you go out and contract for any obligations.
They're asking, please continue to provide a monthly cash flow.
And we do that. We do that with our COE. If you'd like that included in the Friday letter, we could do that as well. When we give that, is that the board's desire to do that?
I would like to see those 2 reports. This is a harsh letter. And my last comment is, do you feel, the first box there, it says, they didn't check it, it says assign a fiscal expert paid for by the county superintendent to advise the district on its financial problems. Do you think that would be a help?
No, sir. And neither do they. If they did feel it would be a help, they'd check that box and they'd send someone over. The answer is no. They have confidence in our leadership here. They have confidence in this board and think we'll do the right thing because of our past history.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. And next we will go to review the school site boundary realignment proposals.
Thank you. For this, I'm going to introduce Mr. Tony Peruzil, and I'm going to say a few things about him and Decision Insight and about the work that we've done with him. And then he's going to give you an overlay of basically what the goals are that we're proposing to you and what the maps look like before and after, and when we would be recommending that we implement this. So first, as far as getting together, Decision Insight does this for districts across California. They're an Orange-based county company. Mr. Ferruzzo has been a public school teacher, principal, and administrator for a full career, and now he's working for Decision Insight and helping districts like ours. One of the things that you need to know, and it was discussed very briefly by some folks recently, is that when we look at the current maps, and some people are asking, how did we ever get to these current maps? What's been done in the past is just as we've added a school, for example, Stonehaven or Peralta, we've taken care of that issue and balanced the student population to fit that new school into the system. We've gone back and asked our long-term employees, and we've looked at paperwork that we have that goes back into the history of Jurupa School District, and we don't know of any time, at least in 30 years, where there's been a totally comprehensive look at all of the boundaries for our elementary schools. So you have this before you tonight. One thing to keep in mind too, and Tony may get to it, we're really not talking about the middle schools or the high schools. There was a little bit of wording that would indicate that we'd be talking about changing boundaries there. We're not proposing that at all. This is all elementary school boundary changes. And with that, I'll ask Mr. Ferruzzo to go with the briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. I add one item of introduction regarding Decision Insight, and that is that the president of Decision Insight is a past board member. The vice president was a retired superintendent of schools, and the rest of the makeup of the staff are people that have worked in the school system. So there's some nice balance of perspective from your point of view, from district staff's point of view, from a site level point of view, to help districts go through this process, because it's a difficult one. And what we're all trying to do is a better thing for your student population. So with that, I will get right into the presentation. Early in this process, the district had set up some realignment goals, and they're in front of you in your community here. One was to maximize the neighborhood schools for K-6 students, as Mr. Gill had mentioned, to minimize, if not eliminate, the non-contiguous areas, elementary school boundaries, to optimize student walking distances, align boundaries, elementary boundaries to the middle and high school, and then to make efficient use of school capacities so that the amount of seats that individual schools have is not exceeded by the projection that we might provide over a 10-year period. And as we're showing in the slides, you'll see is a 5-year projection.
Tony, for 1 second, I just want to add that these slides are also available on the website. So if you want to go home, look at them, and you don't like the paper part, you get to look at them on screen, and also for anyone in the audience.
Great, thank you. The implementation process is always an important one. Anytime that you're going through school boundary changes, there's a obvious, very strong interest on the part of the district, the board, the community, to make sure that that transition takes care of children. And so this has been an important discussion. We're putting it in front of you first so that as you look through some of the changes that we're proposing, you have a sense of how are we going to get there. So first is realigning boundaries effective 2014-15. So we're trying to give enough notice to the community so that there is time for some decision making on their part. To require kindergarten and first grade and all new K-6 students to the district begin with their new school of attendance in 2014-15. One of the reasons that you might include first grade in there is that if we're giving the community a year's notice, they could actually make a decision to take their kindergarten student to a new school boundary and not have a transition from kindergarten to first grade. We then allow existing 2nd through 6th grade students to remain at their home schools. So we're trying to make sure that those schools that are currently out of school aren't pushed out. And as I go through these items 1 through, I think, 6 here, 5, it's also a priority order in terms of how you're taking care of kids. Phasing in 1 additional grade level per year, and I'm going to show you a next slide that has a grid that shows you when those grade levels would be expanding year by year. Allowing family members enrolled concurrently to enroll at the same school so that you're not splitting families up. So if you have one child, a younger child possibly, a kindergarten or first grader, who is required to go to a new school, you would allow parents to request to have their older children go to that new school as well, so the family's not split up. And then finally, allow 2nd through 6th grade students to attend their realigned schools. We have a year-by-year implementation process, but there may be students and families who want to take advantage of a new attendance area because the new attendance area may be closer to their home than the existing attendance area. But you really can't do it unless there's room at the school. So although you want to transition this as quickly as possible, you also don't want to force students who want to remain at their school and continue their education at the school they're in currently not to be forced out by new students coming from an area that wasn't originally in that individual school. This is the transition that might take place by grade level. So in the first year, you would have K1 and new K6 students, as I mentioned. The second year, your first graders become second graders, and you have a whole new batch of kindergartners come in. So essentially, your year-by-year phase-in happens by your original grade level, first grade, advancing a year each year until you complete the transition. This is your current school boundary. This is your current school boundary, and what I tried to do is to show the schools that are now serving a non-contiguous boundary. So the reason there's a lot of color on this map is that, for example, with Granite Hill, that's circled in yellow in their current boundary, they have another area here that they serve, a non-contiguous area, and you have 6 schools currently providing that kind of support to your student population. Ina Arbuckle has 2 separate areas. Granite Hill, let me go to my list here. Pacific Avenue is in purple. Pedley is in red, Rustic Lane is in orange, and Stone Avenue is in blue. And what you'll see is Stone Avenue is they actually serve 3 non-contiguous areas. So part of the effort of this process is to eliminate those non-contiguous areas, which means that other schools obviously have to change, have a change in boundary. Some rather minor changes, some much more difficult changes in terms of an expanded boundary. By the way, I should point out here, the red dots that are on here, Decision Insight software allows us to plot students. So the red dots represent your 2,000 kids, where they currently live, and it's a GPS, it has a Google background. So Granite Hill students are actually plotted, and you'll even notice that your intra-district transfer policy has allowed students from elsewhere in your district to transfer to Granite Hills. So on this map, everywhere you see a red dot, those students attend Granite Hills. Where you see a larger dot is a high-density apartment complex or condos or maybe mobile home that share an address. So it represents anywhere from 50 to 100 students that may come from a particular apartment complex or mobile home, etc. So this kind of gives you a sense of the distance that these students travel to get to school on a daily basis, and when we get to the actual change in boundary, where their new school would be. I'm showing you all at one time in terms of the new boundary. However, we're going to go school by school, and I'll compare the new boundary to the old boundary and give you a sense of what kind of changes are going on for each school. So this is a look across your entire district for the proposed elementary boundaries. Number one, you'll see no color coding up here because there are no non-contiguous boundaries. Every school is serving an area that is all of the students within that same boundary go to that school. There are 6 elementary schools, excuse me. are 6 elementary schools that have the non-contiguous boundaries I showed you that would go through somewhat of a significant realignment. Ina, Arbuckle, Granite Hill, Pacific Avenue, Pedley, Rustic Lane, and Stone Avenue elementary schools. There are some schools, as I mentioned, that will pick up non-contiguous areas. 4 elementaries are recommended for significant realignment, and they include Glen Avon, Indian Hills, Peralta, and Sky Country. 6 of your elementary schools out of the 16 have minor or moderate realignments, and those include Camino Real, Mission Bell, Trough, and then moderate changes to West Riverside, Tennessee, and Van Buren. What I'd like to do now is go by individual school. And here at Ina Arbuckle, let me explain a couple of things that will hold true for the rest of the schools that we'll be looking at. First of all, the red, or in some slides, orange line represents the existing school boundary. So as I mentioned earlier, Ina is a non-contiguous boundary serving these 2 different areas. Ina Arbuckle Elementary School is located right here. The proposed boundary is in blue. So this boundary line here represents the new boundary. It picks up this area from another elementary school that was a non-contiguous boundary, and those students would then travel to Ina Arbuckle. What I'd like to mention in terms of this projection for you and for the audience that we work with, the projections themselves, when you see current enrollment projection, what that means is we're looking at your current student population at a particular school and the history of enrollment at that school, and then projecting out 5 to 10 years what that enrollment's going to look like. That enrollment is based on the students that have actually attended the school. For Ina, actually, let's talk about Granite Hill, for example. You saw some examples of students that attended Granite Hill that don't live in Granite Hill's attendance area. Those students would be in that projection. Students that live in Granite Hill's attendance area and attend Granite Hill would be in that projection. There would also be students who live in Granite Hill who might attend one of your other schools. They're a district student, but they attend a different elementary school. So that formulates this projection as well. So what I'm trying to share with you in general is that an enrollment projection is a reflection of the kids that have attended that school over the past 3 to 4 years, and we project into the future. The difference between an enrollment projection and a geographic projection. A geographic projection, we look at every student, for elementary, every K-6 student that lives in this blue attendance area, and the history of development or the history of enrollment in this area, and then do a projection based on every student in that boundary, and only the students in that boundary. I see a question there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me say it this way. If I were to plot the students here, you might see about 600 students, red dots on that screen. Those students live in that blue boundary area, and that's how that geographic projection is determined.
I get the geographic one.
So there may be a student here that attends Ina.
Right.
There may be a student in Ina that attends another elementary school. The history of what's happening at Ina Elementary School is reflected in an enrollment projection.
Okay, can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, Ina Arbuckle has one of our finest of the programs for special ed.
Okay.
Okay, so it's going to have dots all over the map.
Okay.
How did you equate that?
Based on the history of enrollment in that school and the rollover that takes place on a year-by-year basis, grade level by grade level, we make up this enrollment projection for the entire school based on how the enrollment has changed K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over the past 3 or 4 years, and use that history to project how that will move in the future.
Okay, so they're good educated guesses.
It is. I mean, any projection is an educated guess, but what's important as you look at this, because you're going to see some numbers that are very close. You're going to see some numbers where the geographic projection is actually larger than the current enrollment and vice versa. And it's important for you to understand what the enrollment projection is versus the geographic. So if you just think in terms of enrollment is what's the reality in terms of this school over a set of years, who's actually attended. Geographic is who lives there. And we project will continue to live there.
Okay.
Okay? So with INA, then you can look at the current enrollment, you can look at the projected geographic enrollment and see that what has created this blue line, and I'm going to say a lot more about INA only because it's the first one. What's created this blue line is then also not only looking at the numbers, but then looking at how do students get to this school? Are there railroads? Are there valleys? Are there different things between here and here that keep a student from being able to get to a school in a fair logistic manner? When you look at this total boundary, you have large areas of undeveloped property. This whole area here doesn't have a single student in it. This area here doesn't have a single student. This area here doesn't have a single student. So when you have INA that's located here, and it has several schools near it, we had to go up here to populate INA because Sunny Slope is here, and Sunny Slope can take care of these kids. There's no kids here. So that's kind of what we have to do, and when I say we, I'm talking about Decision Insight, taking a stab at it, but a long, careful discussion with Cabinet and looking at street by street, looking in terms of what's the best thing we can do for INA Arbuckle and the kids it serves. Okay? So that's how we get to this boundary. This is Rustic Lane. Rustic Lane was another area that is a non-contiguous boundary. And based on where Sunny Slope is, based on where Pacific, West Riverside, INA Arbuckle, all of these schools that surround us, in order to grow Rustic Lane and create as much of a neighborhood school as possible, we had to cross the 60 and pick up students in this area. These students that used to be in the non-contiguous area with Rustic Lane now go to INA. So the blue that you see here is the proposed Rustic Lane. These students that live out here go to, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we'll see in a couple minutes. Okay, and then you see the current enrollment projection, and you see that, the geographic projection, they're going to be slightly larger based on the number of kids that actually live in Rustic Lane's new proposed attendance area. Next is West Riverside. West Riverside originally had a boundary that was just a single boundary, and it served this area. And to try and pick up students to serve as close to West Riverside as possible, but to help reduce that non-contiguous situation, we grew West Riverside up to the 60, and we did cross Mission Boulevard to get to those kids. And you can see the resulting, where they are now in their projection and where they're going in an enrollment projection. They're actually in an area that will be declining. And I'm going to keep moving unless the board stops me with a question. This is Sunny Slope. Sunny Slope, the red again, is Sunny Slope's current attendance area. There are no students in this area here yet. It is an area that has a dwelling unit development that will be coming in the future. We took these students to Rustic Lane, and we found that the students that live in this area would populate Sunny Slope, and here's the proposed geographic projection, what happens to Sunny Slope. Here's their current enrollment. So the change to Sunny Slope is, when I say minor, I'm talking about the boundary change itself. There's no change for parents, it's minor. To every single parent and kid, it's an important change for them. So when I say minor or moderate, it has more to do with the amount of movement. This is Peralta. Peralta, again, is one of the school districts that was a singular area, and it was sharing some of these hilltop homes. This orange area here went to Peralta. This orange area here went to Peralta. This area in between went to, I believe it's Indian Hills next door. So what we ended up doing was just taking this whole neighborhood to Indian Hills. It helped Peralta's proposed geographic projection and to serve the students in this area, which is their current boundary with the exception of families that live in those hilltop homes. I'll come to Indian Hills in a minute. We're going to Pacific Avenue. Pacific Avenue, again, was a non-contiguous boundary. This is its current boundary. In order to try and grow Pacific, you can see the location of nearby elementary schools. So we couldn't grow Pacific in this direction. We had to grow it in this direction. So that's why we have kind of an elongated that comes down Lemonite and serves the families that are in this boundary. And that has a lot to do with the schools that are above it. And again, it's a small school. We kept it somewhat small in the proposed geographic projection. Camino Real, again, another school that has very little change to it. We did come up above Jurupa Road to serve a small community here. You'll see that their current enrollment projection is in the 700s. We wanted to maintain viable enrollment within their boundary. We know they pick up students from outside their boundary, which they still could do through the intra-district transfer process. But this would be their proposed geographic projection. This area here is a very small area that has in fact,
My numbers
I think we pulled that down.
We did.
We did. This boundary here actually follows the orange line, and I apologize for not having that updated. So there is no change here.
Well, they're not the same as what's up there. I'm on Camino Real.
Are you looking at the new one or the old one?
I'm looking at the one I think that was handed to me.
The one that was just
what do you
handed
find
to you
different?
should
The
have.
It
proposed
says the
geographic projections, the last number is 762.
All those numbers are.
Yeah.
Oh, what's he got up there?
I'll have to double check those.
Okay. Yeah, because my current enrollment numbers
There-
are different than yours as well.
There were a couple changes, Tony.
I had a couple of pages. What happened in the projections that we were working with as a cabinet, in an effort to try and reduce down to a really simplified and collected slide, I was pulling both geographics from other more detailed slides and projections from other slides. And I had a couple of slides that when I copied and pasted to try and get something that would really summarize what we're looking at, that reflects an error.
And you
So I
know,
can't tell you off the top of my head
Computers
which
were
is
supposed
correct.
to fix all of that.
Yeah, well, it's the person behind the computer that can make
Oh,
the difference.
I see.
So I have to apologize.
We'll
that's
get
my
those
fault.
changes out to you right away. If you have, I'm not sure if the
I
slides
see
or
it.
if this one.
I see it, so you
Okay.
don't have to give me another paper, please. I see it. That's the one we're working on.
Well, what I want to make sure is what I put up here.
Make sure the public gets it.
Those are the correct numbers
Exactly.
you got up there.
And what will be on the website, we'll double check.
Yeah, make sure that's good.
Are you saying those are the correct numbers you have up there?
That's what I'm saying, I have to check it.
Okay.
I need to look at what you have in your hand and what this is and go back and pull up the actual projection.
You want mine?
Because those are
No, I
drastic
have a
numbers.
copy.
Yeah, the
That's
map,
a drastic decline.
Mr. Schaefer, and tell me if I could. The maps are exactly correct. The numbers, because there were some changes, we made those changes. We have to verify whether you're looking at the projected numbers that you have on your desk, if that's correct, or if the slides are correct, because there was a change that was made. I'm just not sure if the slides were changed or if Tony, we put in new pages based upon what you gave us. But we'll get back to you immediately. And I think the important thing tonight is we want to tell you that in every single case where we added students, we looked at the facilities that we have at those schools and ensured that there were enough facilities to take those students. So that's number one. Number two is the boundary changes, the lines that you see are accurate with the exception of that sliver in Camino Real, where we actually took the blue line and moved it back to where the orange line is. So the only thing that changed in Camino is that one little rectangular kind of area up top.
And I think the bottom line that Paul's sharing with you is when we went through the decision making of what the proposal would reflect, we're looking at the correct numbers. It's just getting here in front of you, I've got to double check. And I apologize. That's my fault. Indian Hills. Indian Hills, the only change to Indian Hills is the area I talked about before. It's taking this area that was split between the two schools and taking to Indian Hills. You see the current enrollment. It is a smaller proposed geographic projection. And if I were to plot Indian Hills for you and plot all their students, what we would see is students that attend Indian Hills from outside of their school boundary. Pedley was one of the major changes. Pedley Elementary School is one of the non-contiguous boundaries. This is their existing boundary, and this is their existing boundary. So right now, if I were to plot students for Pedley, you would see these students who travel this distance to go to school. And that's one of the things that we're correcting with this boundary change. And you'll see that what we ended up actually doing is taking these students over to Sky Country. I'll show you that in a second. So again, each of these projections work real well for the number of seats available in a school and making sure that the capacity the school has matches the geographic projection for students that live inside that area. So you see a lot of growth here in terms of where they pick students up. This is Stone Avenue, as I mentioned earlier. Stone Avenue had 3 non-contiguous areas. So again, you had students traveling. This line here represents Stone Country, Stone Avenue is below Jurupa right now, and it grows above Jurupa to make it one contiguous area. And again, when you look at where other elementary schools are, you can see why in order to pick up enough students to create a contiguous area and maintain an enrollment, it has to pick up somewhat of an unusual shape. It looks like Texas. Glen Avon actually shrinks on one side. This is their existing boundary here. It shrinks on one side and grows on the other to help pick up some non-contiguous areas. So there is a shift in enrollment, but you can see Glen Avon is centralized for the most part to the student population based on, again, neighborhood schools and populating Glen Avon, but not taking students away from other schools. It has this unusual shape. With Granite Hill again is another non-contiguous area. They were serving an area on the other side of Sunny Slope. So we took these students, some of this is undeveloped property to be developed in the future, to other schools, Sunny Slope and another neighboring school, shrunk Granite Hill to a certain extent. We did still have to come below the 60 because the population for Granite Hill is right here. The population predominantly is below the 60 here, and in this area, this really is undeveloped land with no students living in it. So their boundary, if I were to circle residential areas, would really look like this. Mission Bell, which is adjacent to Granite Hill, for the same reason that we had to populate Granite Hill by coming down below the 60. There are roads and a population up here that we needed to be served by Mission Bell. So this area had to come below the 60 in order to balance the enrollment between Granite Hill and Mission Bell. Van Buren could actually shrink. So the number of students that is in this geographic area is actually sufficient to populate their school based on their capacity. and we took this area over to, I think it was Pedley. Troth, originally Troth represented or handled this entire area here. There are currently no students in this area, but again, as you mentioned, there will be some development that will take place here. But we moved this area into a contiguous border with Sky Country, and you can see that Sky Country will grow. Actually, when you go out 10 years, there's some additional growth here because of some of the areas that will be developed in the future. So Troth shrinks to serve the area that it's currently serving. So there's really no change to Troth in terms of the students that live in its current attendance area because there are no students in this area. And this is Sky Country. Sky Country picks up the undeveloped area. And then this area from Pedley. This was a non-contiguous area from Pedley that will now go to Sky Country. So although they've got to cross the 15, they were crossing the 15 to go all the way to Pedley. Now they're going across the 15 to get to Sky Country. The middle and high schools, as Paul mentioned a little earlier, we're not going to be making any changes to the middle and high schools. However, when we worked through the development of the elementary school boundaries, we were very intent on aligning the new elementary boundaries to existing high schools. There are 5 elementary boundaries that are actually split between 2 high schools in the new proposal. However, 2 of them, the area that's split off, and I think it was Sunny Slope and Granite Hill. It was Granite Hill. Actually have no students in the area that's split off to the other school. So you really only have, in the proposal, you only have 3 elementary schools that split their enrollment to a different middle school or to a different high school. In this new alignment, the rest of the elementary schools are all aligned to their to a high school and the current high school boundary and the current middle school boundary. So that slide gets replaced by the comments that Mr. Gill and I just made. Next steps, next Monday night, we're planning to present, Tuesday night, thank you, February 12th, 6 p.m., Patriot High School community meeting to share this information. One of the things that we'll be working through this week to provide to that audience is as specific maps as we can that will show to the greatest degree possible the kind of streets that may outline. A little bit more general here tonight in terms of trying to take you through this process, but we'll show more specific street maps to the degree that we can. Staff review the input from the community meeting, and we'll come back to the board on February 19th to recommend the final boundary proposal.
Are we still just planning one community meeting?
We are going to, we're going to see how that goes, Mrs. Burns, and if it looks as though there's a reason to have another, we will. We will also, though, make ourselves available, regardless if there's just one. If some parents want to meet with us on a small group basis or an individual basis, we'll have appointments for those parents as well. And then we need to have, as we discussed, we need to have implementation meetings as we get closer to the date, because we're just looking at doing this. It would not start until almost a year and a half from now, and it would not end for another 6 or 7 years from now. So we want to have implementation meetings because we don't expect everybody to remember, or some people won't even be in the district right now, and they find out we're making these changes. Also, one thing to keep in mind too is we have a fairly flexible transfer program. We have over 300 intra-district transfers that were approved this year, and we'd expect to have that same flexibility in future years too. So parents will have choices.
I personally would rather see at least one meeting on both sides of town, because it's hard for me to imagine the parents at Mission Bell School even getting this information at all. And those that do, will they go clear across town and transportation and husbands to fix a dinner? So I personally, depending on what the board wants, I would rather see a meeting on both sides of town. I don't want to have somebody say that we didn't care enough to make sure that there was plenty of information out there.
We could do that, Mrs. Burton. We would then delay probably till your March meeting, the final adoption, because we have not noticed any. We did send district-wide, both via what's the thing called? Teleparent. And written notice, so we would want to do the same thing for a second meeting. So
if there isn't
we're
an
happy to
emergency deadline for the adoption, I don't see any harm in holding it off for one more meeting for the parents of the other side of town.
We could do that.
We could set something up. You only have one meeting in March, and it's later, so we could shoot for about the first week of March to have a meeting over in Jurupa Valley High
Well, it
School.
depends on what the rest of the board has to say, because I'm only one.
Mr. Schaefer?
Has there been any reaction from the parents to express their concerns?
No, I received one email from Mrs. Stokely's not here, so she won't think I'm trying to shine her on. I thought she did a great job, actually, if you saw the newspaper article. It generated one email to me, which I answered and have not heard from that individual again. I think a lot of people will welcome the changes because it makes a lot more sense. I think for our school children, we can, especially in elementary school, we can get a lot more parental involvement as well, because they don't need to go across town to see their children, and some of them only have parents only have one car, and the working spouse is taking it. So I really see this, you can't do when you have 19,300 children. I don't know that it will satisfy everybody, but I think most people will welcome this kind of change.
It may be what the start to retain our students so they don't transfer out of district.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a meeting in March, though?
Yeah. All right, we will move to action session, or item G. Are there any other administrative reports and written communications?
No.
Thank you. So we will move on to the action session with item A, items 1 through 12.
I will move for approval of items A1 through 12 as printed.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Student board members, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Board, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Item B, accept the 2011-2012 audit report. Mr. Gill.
Thank you. Mr. Jeff Nigro is here, the principal of Nigro. And Karen has gone back during this last briefing and asked him to explain the answer that Mr. Schaefer asked on the discrepancy of a $10 million, $7 million discrepancy, looking at two numbers. So if he will do that, you also, to let the members of the audience know, you received individually in the mail, independent of district distribution. You received the audit report already, and there were no major discrepancies. So with that, Mr. Nigro.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me here tonight to talk about the district audit. It was filed back in December with the state controller as required by law, but I'm here to kind of give you a brief overview and to answer any questions you have. The handout I gave you is something for you to peruse later. I wasn't going to plan to go through that tonight, page by page, but just in case you want to go back and refer to it, you're welcome to. I just want to kind of address some of the major highlights of the audit, and I like to start by pointing out what an audit is and what an audit is not. An audit is not a fraud examination. It's not a team of us coming in here, kicking down the front door and storming the business office and looking at every transaction. It's not a fraud investigation, although as auditors we do have to keep alert to the possibility that fraud could occur in any organization. But what an audit really is, it's an examination of the district's financial statements. And what we try to do is determine whether those financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, which we call GAAP. And at the end of it, we give an opinion on those financial statements. Now, auditors can give different types of opinions. The opinion we're giving in these financial statements is what we call unqualified. Now, in this case, unqualified means good. That means there were no exceptions to our opinion that the financial statements were prepared in accordance with GAAP. So that's the first good sign. The rest of the report, frankly, is going to look very similar to prior audit reports in format and style. I mean, there's going to be a section right after our report that talks about, it's called MD&A, Management's Discussion and Analysis. And it's a narrative overview of the audit report. It's for those of you who aren't numbers people. If you're the type of person that looks at a page full of numbers and starts getting lightheaded and you just can't handle that, you can read through this section and it kind of gives you a good executive overview of the audit report. It kind of gives you a lot of comparative data. The financial statements themselves, obviously the numbers are different, but the format and layout of the statements is very similar to prior years. Different views of the district from different viewpoints, some focusing on the big picture, some more focused on individual funds. The notes to the financial statements are there to give you more detail, more background information about the district, about financial statement reporting, about GASB, really exciting stuff. But one of the footnotes I do want to point out because it's, and let me see, start on page 37, there's a footnote, note number 8, it talks about long-term debt. And Mr. Schaefer, I think you were pointing out that COPs in the audit report showed $7 million. But in fact, what we did is right underneath that, there's a site lease agreement, which is actually, technically that's a certificate of participation as well. So that $2.9 million is the difference that was pointed out earlier. We just chose to report it separately in the audit report because it was a different COP than the original one. Another thing that happened pretty significantly this year is the district refunded some of the general obligation bonds in 11-12. And that was done in November of 2011. And at the bottom of that page, 37, you'll see that refinancing saved taxpayers of the district about $2.8 million in interest. So it's similar to doing a refinance on your home loan, which is basically restructure the debt to take advantage of lower interest rates. District also did that with some of the COPs as well, which is described starting on page 38. And then the rest of the report is made up of a bunch of schedules that are required by the State Controller's Office. They're the agency up in Sacramento that approves your audit report. And GASB requires some of these schedules as well. There's some letters in there that talk about the audit standards that we followed in conducting the audit, that we had to follow government auditing standards. We had to follow federal audit standards and audit certain federal programs. And we also had to follow the state audit guide in auditing certain state programs like your attendance accounting, your class size reduction program and such. And basically all those letters are saying is that if we had found any internal control deficiencies in the district or any areas where the district was out of compliance with any of those federal or state laws, that we would report them to you in this report as audit findings. So those lead you right up to the last section, which is the findings. And that's usually the back of the report, but it's usually where people flip to first. I'm very pleased to tell you this year that there were no audit findings. No findings over internal controls, no findings over federal compliance, no findings over state compliance. Page 75 is a schedule, just so you're not confused. That's a schedule that reports back the status of prior audit findings. So there were two findings from your 2010-11 audit report, and we're restating them here and showing that what the original finding was, what our recommendation was, and we're showing that the district implemented our recommendations in both cases to clear both of those issues. Finally, in the back of the report is a letter that we're addressing to you, the governing board, to let you know of some issues that came up during the audit. Definitely were not significant enough to be considered findings, but they were issues that were brought to management's attention during the course of the audit, and so we wanted to be sure we pointed them out to you as well. Many of these items were brought up back last spring when we were out doing the site testing at the schools, and many of them I would imagine have already been addressed, and they'll be looked at again when we go out to our next round of auditing for this year. And that's your audit report in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I would just, if I could, Madam Chair, I'd just like to thank Mrs. Russell and her staff. She continues to do a remarkable job. It's a very good report, and thank Mr. Nigro for recognizing that.
Mr. Schaefer?
I just have a couple of questions. On page 32 of the audit, it shows the investments. You've got AIM Trust, Treasury, Portfolio, U.S. Bank, Money Market, Deutsche Bank, almost 15 million. But on page 10 of the audit, it shows investments of only 11. Is there, and I can't follow where these investment, where the investment numbers follow through on the.
Right. Well, if you go to page 19, you'll see there's another schedule that shows 3.6 million of investments as well. The 3.6 million that's shown on page 19, that's funds that are held in trust by, I forget, is it U.S. banks that hold them for the CFDs. So that's money that's being held for debt service purposes to repay CFDs.
I got you.
So the 11.3 million in on page 10 is for, and you'll see that amount also on page 12. And that's the amount that's held for the CLPs.
I got another question, but if someone else wants to go. On page 43, you've got construction commitments. As of June 30th, 2012, unfinished capital projects total approximately 6.9 million. What are the unfinished maybe Paul could answer that. I don't know if you could. What are the unfinished capital
I don't have that detail in front of me, but we can certainly get that to you. I can tell you what the number represents, not specifically. Those are contracts that were entered into that have not been, basically it's a way of saying unencumbered POs, or it's basically the unfinished amount of contracts that have been started. But I have the detail in my work papers. I'd have to look that up and get it to you.
I think some of that would be, some of that would be probably the the COP for the Chevron, because we have unfinished project for the
Well, that was
high
just
school.
212.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At that point, those
Probably.
would not have been
We'll
done.
check it if it's different, but we have 2 air conditioning projects, the gymnasium at Jurupa Valley High School and the gymnasium at Riverdale High School, that we put off until we can fit those in during the off season. So that may well be part of it. There might be something else out there. I'll send something out through the superintendent in a Friday letter. I'll let you know.
Yeah, that was of, what's that now, about 8 months ago to 6 months ago.
And then the last question is, in the findings and questioned costs, you name ASB at Rupa Valley High, what else here? ASB at Riverdale. The accounting procedures for, we're not following proper accounting procedures for these funds.
Oh, are you referring to the last 3 pages of the report?
Yeah, your comments there. Every year I think you mention that, but we don't do anything about it. As far as accounting for the stores, there's got to be a couple $100,000 going through all of these high school stores, right? Do we have checks and balances on that? Do we have an accounting procedure for that?
Yes, each of the school sites have the procedures that are set out for them, and they are following GASB or the GAP guidelines, and have been set out by the auditors and audited at that point in time. Not having complete control, or I guess direct control of them. All we can do is kind of is monitor them on a monthly to a quarterly basis, looking at their financial statements, which is what we do. Each year we, when we have the different recommendations, we ask that the school sites place those recommendations into, but unfortunately we have a lot of turnover in some of the clubs that are supervised throughout the district by the teachers perhaps or other personnel. We do have some training coming up at the end of May that we're going to go back and try and catch everyone at one time and readdress some of these problems.
Yes, what I can tell you about ASBs is these are very common because, and it may seem like they're repeating over and over, but what happens is ASBs, there's so many people involved in the process. So it might be one of those situations where you put your finger in the hole in the dam in one spot and a leak sprouts over here, because you got teachers, you got coaches, you got advisors, students, volunteers, a lot of different people handling cash. So the procedure is there, it just takes one person to overlook it or to try to take a shortcut. That's why we feel that they're important enough to point out, so that management can take action on the things as they come up. But yeah, it's kind of a, I don't want to say it's a lost cause, because you certainly keep going after the, when you see patterns, you continue to hit on those. But no, by no means is this district alone in the area of having ASB comments in the report.
Can I just say real quick, it's our ASBs for the most part do a really good job. It's that, it just takes one or two individuals out of all of those people to, put a hole in the dike. But again, they do a really nice job.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
That's not it yet.
All right, so we now have a motion whether to accept the audit report and direct it to provide copies to the state and county agencies.
Did you say you had a motion, or you're looking?
No,
for
I'm looking for one.
I will move that we do the appropriate action on the audit report and accept it.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
And a second from Mr. Schaefer. Students, should we accept? Yes. Thank you. Board, all those in favor say yes or aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Item C, approve purchase of Hewlett-Packard ProBook 6570B laptops for Ina Arbuckle Elementary School. Mr. Gill.
Yes, ma'am. We want to buy 36 Hewlett-Packard laptops for our students. There is a tracking service on that. We are going to spend, with your approval, $28,512. It's going to be funded through Title I Assistance to Schools. An assistant recommends the board approves the purchase of Hewlett-Packard ProBook 65070B laptops for Ina Arbuckle Elementary School from HP in the amount of $28,512.
Move for approval.
Have a motion.
Okay.
And a second by Mr. Hernandez. Students, in favor say aye. Aye. Board, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Item D, act on student discipline cases. We have one revoke expulsion case, item number 10-259.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Board, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Expulsion administrative hearing, we have one, 13-032.
Move for approval.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Expulsion cases, agreement and stipulation, we have 6. 13-036, 13-039, 13-040, 13-044, 13-046, and 13-050.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Suspended expulsion case? Thank you, 4-0. Suspended expulsion case, agreement and stipulation, we have 1, 13-043.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Expulsion, suspended expulsion case, administrative hearing, we have 2, 13-042 and 13-047.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Approved reinstatement cases, we have 4, 12-056, 12-062, 12-099, and 12-100.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Denied reinstatement cases, we have 6, 12-004, 12-014, 12-109, 12-119, 12-120, and 13-006.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Denied admission cases, we have 2, 13-048 and 13-049.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Item E, approved personnel matters. Approved personnel report number 12, Mrs. Elsig.
Thank you. Administration recommends approval of personnel report number 12 as printed.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. And item F, board member comments and committee reports. Mrs. Burns, we'll start with you tonight.
Even though I've gone and doing committee meetings and we agreed that Cheryl would do the committee report for the budget committee. That was really great having that Fulbright in here. I really, really enjoyed hearing her enthusiasm, and that was wonderful. So you tell her that I really, really was excited about how she feels about us, and you let her know that I feel the same about her. Okay? Other than that, I need to talk to you before we leave today, because I need to set up my schedule. So, other than that, I have no, did I do any more committees? No, just the one over the phone. Next.
Mr. Schaefer.
Thank you, Mary. I would just like to congratulate and welcome Lindsay Butler from the UK. Wonderful program for her and for our students. I'd like to also address Mr. Luna and Mrs. Martinez, who spoke about safety. Safety is priority number one. Students, teachers, employees must be able to be in an environment where instruction is given by teachers in a safe environment. We will remain vigilant at all times concerning safety. There are issues. There will always be issues, safety issues. There were issues before Sandy Hook. There are issues after Sandy Hook. We must remain vigilant. We must listen to everyone. We must ferret out what the facts are. Doesn't matter your position in this community, everyone in this community has a duty to ferret out what the facts are so that our students, employees, and teachers have a safe environment. And sadly, since Sandy Hook, there have been other incidents where students have been shot, kidnapped, name it. There are evil people in this world, and there always will be. Sadly, there will be another Sandy Hook. And it may not be, you know, everyone's talking about assault weapons, high-capacity clips. The worst school tragedy happened in, I think it was 1929. It happened in Bath Township, Michigan. It was an employee of the district, the treasurer, that his house foreclosed on. He put a bomb underneath the school. Only half the bombs went off, and 45 people were killed. 38 were children. It was a bomb. So when you talk about security, when we have people trying to break into the schools at night, are they testing our security to put a bomb here? Klebold and Harris had bombs at Columbine. Luckily they didn't go off, but you have evil people trying to do harm to our children, teachers, and employees of school districts across this country. So yes, we must remain vigilant, and we are. And Mr. Luna and Mrs. Martinez and anyone else should be able to call any of us, call anyone at the district office and ask questions. This is their community. We're here to serve them. So any questions, there will be answers for them. But everyone should know that security is number one, and we have our Sheriff's Department here to help us. They're always out there, always, and they're not recognized as they should be. So it's sad what's going on in this world, but we must move on and educate our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez.
I don't have too much to say. Mr. Schaefer said a lot of it. But I want to thank, first of all, staff. Mr. Oh, shoot, I forgot your name. I'm looking right at you.
Gill.
Mr. Gill and Mr. Trujillo. I've known you for years, so I don't know why I don't remember your name. For your reports, both of them excellent professional reports. I appreciate the Common Core discussion. I appreciate, I had the opportunity to go to AAA Academy and view what they do over there. Excellent job by the teachers and the staff over there. Also was able to attend their awards program, which was very telling because there was a lot of parents there, family members, very concerned about their children's being successful. And I think it shows a lot because now a lot of them are 42.5 credits ahead, and they have the opportunity to earn 85. But just to see the parents themselves, to be there, to know that their child has struggled, and to support them, to come out there. And I thought that was an excellent program to be put on for these young people, to show them that they can be successful. It just takes a little time and effort to show them that they have value. And they're just not going to be left out there blowing in the wind, but be guided and show them that they can do the best they can. But I want to thank those individuals that have done work on the AAA Academy and all the and the fall break. I want to go to England. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank Mr. Gill for giving my budget committee report basically for me. Oh no, hey, I thank you. It gave everybody a good overview of what we discussed. And we were also discussing the Obama Health and Welfare bill that's coming forward and the twists and turns that it could cause for us and all other employers out there. And we will be getting an overview of that from the county in the next few weeks as the budget committee with both unions and that to kind of give us all an idea of what we're looking at when it comes to health and welfare and the contributions that the district will have to make on that. Mrs. Butler, it was nice to meet her and see what the Fulbright is doing for her, and can only hope that it's doing the same for our teacher that's taking her place over in England. We've got a couple of fundraisers we can go to in the next week or so. Thank you for letting us know about that. And some new boundaries to look at. I hope parents will come out, and if they have concerns or are happy, both ways, happy or concerned about boundary changes, that they will let their voice be heard at these meetings and at the next board meeting. And with that, everyone have a good evening, and we will see. Yes, Mr.
I'm sorry, just one other thing. I just don't mean to be rude, but at this presentation for school boundaries, is there going to be a bilingual individual making that presentation also?
Yes.
And is it going to be just at one school or at two schools or even at three schools? Because I know that at Rural High School they have a strong parent program out there, that they have a large number of individuals that are Spanish speaking, and I don't know if you guys are going to be able to get them involved also.
I believe it's set up for Patriot right now. They're going to look at Jurupa, and that letters went out to all students and phone calls were made to all parents, and I'm sure it was in both Spanish and English letters and the parent teleconference calls.
And we also, Mr. Hernandez, if I could, we have a DLAP committee meeting, and we're presenting the information to those folks too, who are all Spanish speakers and represent an awful lot of the community, the school community.
Thank you. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.